Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Another busy week, fun week, a little bit of ceremony, a little bit of work. We're in the full swing of things. Good news, I made it back, although it was 35 degrees outside after the polar bear plunge. It was infinitely colder than it was last year, and I don't think I've been that cold in a very, very, very long time, but it was a great cause. Special Olympics is incredible, and the polar bear plunge in Maryland is such an incredible event every year. I know today there's going to be a whole other group coming, and tomorrow, I think, is another big day for the organization. So it was a pleasure to do it. It was a bipartisan experience. Senator Jennings, Senator Salling, and I, and who else was there? Delegate Cardin. So great time and a good moment to celebrate Marylanders who deserve it. Let's see. We had a very impactful and inspiring State of the State on Wednesday. A lot of great coverage of what I thought was really, a moving rendition. Having the first Black governor give the first first person to give that State of the Union was just a really powerful moment. And I thought the overarching message was right, that service matters. And that if we want to heal our country, we're going to have to work together, and we're going to have to serve together. And so I thought it was a really historic speech that set us on the right path for this session. We've had a number of bill hearings. We're in full swing. As you all saw last week, or this week, we passed the 998 funding bill. It was the first bill that we passed for the session. Again, no surprise there. It's probably one of the most important issues this year, and will be moving forward. Next week, we're going to have, it will be full of bill hearings, but also we'll be doing the executive nominations of some of the newly named secretaries. And so we're joined here today by the chair of our Executive Nominations Committee, who I'll hand it over to in just a moment, to talk about that executive nominations process. So that will kick us down the road of going through the talented people that the governor has nominated. And then, of course, the other big issue for next week is going to be the Firearm Safety Day in Annapolis on Tuesday. This will be in the Judicial Proceedings Committee, a number of bills. We're joined by the Vice Chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee to talk about a number of these pieces of legislation, and most importantly, SB 1, which is dealing with the Bruen decision and how Maryland plans to move forward. We are in a new constitutional setting with a new precedent, and what the Maryland Senate does is we take hard issues and we work through them. And that's what we'll be doing on Tuesday, and trying to make sure that Marylanders are protected from gun violence as best as possible. So without further ado, let me hand it over to the chair of our Executive Nominations Committee, Pam Beidel. Senator Beidel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. So Monday night, February 6th, we're going to start the executive nominations hearings with the secretaries. So we'll have a total of 27 nominees on Monday, but 9 of them are proposed secretaries, currently referred to as acting secretaries. As most of you here know, if the motion is positive on Monday, those secretaries will then move to the full floor of the Senate by Friday. I've personally met with 9 of the acting secretaries that we're going to interview on Monday, and in my opinion, the governor and his appointment secretary, Tisha Edwards, have nominated secretaries that bring strong expertise to their positions. I've been really delighted to meet with them. But it's important that we move efficiently through this process so the secretaries can begin their important work that's really needed to serve the citizens of Maryland, and that they're fully empowered. So we're looking forward to this coming Monday night, and then on Monday the 13th, we should finish the executive nominations process for the secretaries. The other issue is we talk about Gun Day on Tuesday. I'll have the gun center bill that we passed last year, but this year it's Senate Bill 185, and it's really going to be about tracking, screening, and vetting guns that folks have used in domestic violence, which is an important issue. So we're going to sort of narrow in on guns used in domestic violence. So that's my week ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. President, for your invitation. Next week, the Judicial Proceedings Committee, where I serve as vice chair, will have a series of hearings regarding public safety and the urgent need to end gun violence in our state. The central bill of that hearing will be Senate Bill 1, the Gun Safety Act of 2023. I deeply appreciate the statement that President Ferguson has made by designating the legislation Senate Bill 1. But for me, SB 1 is not a statement. It's a question. What kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of state do I want to raise my 3 children in? A state awash in guns, armed to the teeth, and drowning in concealed carry permits, a state where every small dispute risks escalation into gun violence, where a routine fender bender or a shove at a bar, where a dispute over a bill, or a rivalry at a stadium becomes an invitation to murder, where I don't know whether the man sitting next to me and my family in synagogue is carrying a semi-automatic weapon. That's not a world I want to live in after Bruen. That's not a state I want to raise my children in, and I won't. And that's why I'm introducing SB 1 next Tuesday. Thank you.
All right, let's open it up to questions.
If we could start with the appointments, can you talk about the process and how long it will take and how many secretaries are actually there that need to be fully confirmed?
Thank you for the question. This week, there'll be 9 secretaries, and we'll hear from all of them, and hopefully at the end of the evening, the 19 senators will agree to move those names forward. So once those names are moved, motion to go forward, they'll go to the floor of the Senate. Usually we announce on Thursday and then vote on Friday or the following Monday, depending on if we have a pro forma on Friday. And if that is all confirmed, then the secretaries will be, well, they're already beginning their work, but they can confidently know they're no longer acting secretaries. Thank you.
Senator Byer, while you're still up there, SB 185, does that include if a gun is confiscated through a final protective order, the police agency who has possession of the gun has to tell state police who'll do a database to keep track on how often this happens? Is that included in that one?
I believe so. It's, you know, we need to know when these guns are used in domestic violence. And this was brought to me really by the advocates from House of Ruth. And so it's, in some states, it's already being used. And I think it's important that we know in this state how these guns are used in domestic violence.
Just to add on this, I think, I think this week, the Fifth Circuit had a case related to interpretations of the Bruen case. And the standard is whether or not the regulation was applicable in the 18th century. That is ludicrous. When we have weapons of war that have the capability of destroying people from hundreds of yards away, that did not exist in 1780. It didn't exist in 1790. The world has changed, and so to think that the regulatory scheme is just that we have to think back to what was in place in the 18th century seems to be a standard that I don't want to live in a state that thinks that's the appropriate way forward, and certainly one where I fear for my children.
1 week ago, the Tyre Nichols video was released. I want to get your reaction on that. And then a follow-up. Yesterday, Governor Wes Moore gave an interview reacting to it, and he says he believes there are additional things that could be done with regards to training for police officers. After the bill that was passed last year for police reform, what do you think your body, the legislative body, can do to ensure additional training so that that doesn't happen again?
Right, so, I wish I hadn't seen the video. I knew I felt obligated to understand because of the possibilities of the impact here in Maryland. It was horrible. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. And I just kept thinking as a dad, it was horrible. It was horrible. And, I did and still believe that the work that we did in the 21 session was some of the hardest work that we've ever done, that I've ever been a part of. The police reform effort that we did in 2021 session was incredibly challenging because these are really hard and complex issues, and they're incredibly emotional, rightfully so. What I say in Maryland is most important is that we implement the reforms that we enacted in 21 with fidelity. We are still moving forward in that process, and each jurisdiction is putting together its police accountability board. The charging committees are being stood up. The training is continuously being updated. The Police Standards Commission is issuing new regulations and new training standards and working on the evaluative tools. I'm proud of the work that we did in 2021. It has to be implemented with fidelity, and so I think that's the key for Maryland moving forward.
Should there be additional funding to help police departments with additional training?
I mean, certainly, I think that additional training will always be something that we should be considering and making sure that it's effective. You know, training for training's sake is not effective, but when we have evidence that it does make an impact and make communities safer and make law enforcement officers more effective, we should absolutely explore it.
Mr. President, we're expecting to see the recreational cannabis bill introduced possibly as early as today. I know there were meetings on it yesterday. First thoughts, passing thoughts on what you've seen in the 120-some page bill?
Yeah, look, this is a big bill, and it is a big bill for a reason. This is it's going to be a new expanded marketplace of adult use. Marylanders have asked us to move it forward by passing the constitutional amendment this past election. I'm really proud of the work that our senators have done through the interim in conjunction with the House. This is a coordinated effort. Senator Feldman, Senator Hayes, who are the co-sponsors of the bill, have been really working diligently with members of the House. And then, of course, our chairwoman, Melanie Griffith, who will be overseeing the bill as it moves forward this year. They've all been in close coordination and talking through the variety of issues. It's a complex topic. There's a lot of different pieces. No state has gotten it right. And so what I do believe we've done effectively here is put us on the best path possible for, one, protecting public health and having a regulated marketplace where we have a real regulatory framework in place that makes sure that product that is on the street that's being sold legally is safe. And two, is open up and expanded the marketplace in a more equitable way to make sure that those who have been harmed by the failed war on drugs have the opportunity to participate in the new marketplace. And then finally, we will be able to use the revenues that are generated in order to invest in communities that have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs. And so it's a very intentional, thoughtful framework that I think is I'm really glad that we were working together as two chambers to get this done as quickly as possible, but as thoughtfully as possible.
As a follow-up, the bills are going to be identical in the House and the Senate. What do you think are the flexion points, the items of discussion, potential differences between the two chambers?
It's hard to project. I mean, I think it's a big bill. There's a lot of issues, from tax rates to licensing schemes to the regulatory model and where the agency ends up. So it's hard to predict. I think we'll work through it. I feel confident that even if there are differences as bills cross through the chambers, what happened to this interim to get to where we are today is a meeting of the minds that this is really important that we get done together. And so there will be differences, but we'll work them out.
Are there points in the bill that you think need to be worked out?
And I feel very good about the bill. I think it has the possibility of being a national model.
You could pass a clean bill and feel good about it?
Sure. Yes. I mean, I think that I feel very confident that this is a good bill. And I'm hopeful that when we do pass the final product and the governor signs it, that we can be proud of the work that went into it to learn from other states to create a more equitable and fair marketplace in a new market, in a new industry. And so I feel really good about it.
Can you give us some of the details of the equity piece? Apparently there were going to be possibly two rounds of licensing for the three different areas, processors, dispensers, and growth. Can you give us some of those details?
Yeah, I mean, some of the high-level pieces are that we would start sales on July 1st. That's what the constitutional amendment has set forward and is an important value. We've seen what's happened in places like New York, where there are over 1,400 unlicensed dispensaries. And so the idea of having a thoughtful marketplace is really evaporated in New York because there's been such a delay in doing the legal licensing. So it's really important in this one that we have legal sales available on July 1st. And so that was a driving principle. The current medicinal marketplace participants will have the ability to convert their license to be able to sell in July, but the first new licenses will be for social equity applicants. And that will be a first round available just to those who qualify for this particular pool so that we can make sure that we have diversity in the marketplace of who can participate in the growing sales dispensaries. We also have different levels of licenses. So we have the larger scale growers and we'll have the micro growers. We've seen this in other industries and delivery opportunities that they're smaller businesses. It's very difficult to just open up a brand new grow establishment or facility. It takes enormous amounts of capital. It takes the location. And so we've tried to be really intentional to have tiered processes so you don't have to be independently wealthy to get into the market. So the rounds are intentionally built for those social equity applicants to be able to participate. And then I would say additionally, in the revenue generation side, 30% of the revenues will be allocated specifically for impacted communities. So that is a very, very intentional part of the bill, is that the revenues that are generated can go back into communities that have been negatively impacted.
Hey, Chairman Wilson, I think, had mentioned yesterday that the medicinal operations that decide to also sell recreationally, they will have to pay a fee in order to do that. What is that fee?
That one, there will be a fee that will help. What we know is that capital is hard to put together for the startup of these businesses. It's still a complicated marketplace. And so the fee will be based on the size of the grow facility. It's going to be a tiered progressive fee that will go into and be made accessible so that those who are social equity applicants can tap into funds to be able to open and run their own businesses.
Mr. President, just to follow up on that, right? We've heard a lot about equity, right, from everybody involved in this bill. Do you have any legal concerns about the set-asides?
You know, I think almost every state where this has happened, there's been litigation. And so I think we have to be very honest about the possibilities of what litigation could look like. And as we've been designing the bill, we've been doing whatever we can to try and avoid those potential pitfalls. This is a really complicated and hard area. And any time that there's a limited amount of licenses or a limited good, there's the possibility that somebody could feel like they were not incorporated into the marketplace, and litigation can. So we can't protect against every possible claim. I feel that we've really learned from other states, and that this one will withstand any legal scrutiny. Of course, the legislative process will help flesh that out further, but I feel good about the framework as it stands.
And just one more question on that. Will there be a pathway for folks who have maybe been convicted on possession or possession with intent to distribute charges to enter the legal market?
So the bill does not speak to the specific, so there are factors for social equity applicants. I'm not aware, I can't remember whether or not there's a specific piece on those who had possession with intent to distribute. I think there's going to be a separate companion bill on the issue of expungement on those issues, but for the applicants, I have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, appreciate it.
The 30% that you said will be for the revenue that will be set aside to be reinvested in the communities that have been impacted. Can you expand on where that money will go and what exactly that will be used for in those communities? Does it differ based on?
So the goal will be to empower communities to further their investments in community empowerment initiatives that we've seen in many places, but the resources have not been available. So there's defined communities having to do with the impact on arrests and where we know that the war on drugs has had the most negative impact. Ideally, what the money will go towards is helping businesses to open, helping to invest in community development projects, affordable housing initiatives, really empowering individuals who live in those communities to do the things that they know best will help to empower their neighbors. And so, you know, it'll be part of the legislative process to make sure that we put the meat on the bones of where that is going to be most effective. And so that's our intent this session.
In the original legislation that attached to the constitutional amendment, there were 40 million set aside for grants and loans for minority business owners and HBCU incubators. Does this legislation add additional funding?
It will, but not in the exact same pot. That was sort of an initial infusion, and I believe that's the money that the governor just recently released, and I believe the commission is working on putting together a plan on how that will be distributed. So we want to make sure that that money is used effectively and see the full scope of its use before, you know, kind of committing to doubling down.
Yesterday, we were in the appellate court up the street for the case involving Adnan Syed, and the issue at hand was victims' rights, and if the proper steps were taken to notify family members before another legal step would be taken in the courts in Baltimore City. One of the things that kept on coming out in court is, should this be a legislative issue, since all of the decisions have already been made in a lower court? I don't know if you've been following this, but do you know if this is something that you all would take up with regards to putting out certain guidelines on if there's a stay or an appeal, then that means, for example, a state's attorney can't make certain decisions until that's cleared up?
So I am not aware of any legislation this year on that. Have you seen anything this year? I'm not aware of anything. I haven't been following it too closely. I mean, just the headlines really, and don't know the specifics, and don't feel qualified yet to know, to have response.
I thought I might ask because even in the courtroom, they were saying this is a novel issue. And then my last thing, perhaps if you can give us some sort of explanation about this whole stadium deal with the O's. I know that there has been some sort of thing that's gone on in the General Assembly with regards to funding. Is there anything additional that is going to be done on you guys' part that can be considered before December 31st? Or is it just up to the O's and the governor at this point?
Well, actually, I would say it really is. Right now, it's a negotiation between the Stadium Authority and the Orioles. The state of Maryland owns the facility. We are the landlords for the Orioles, who are the tenants, from an agreement that I believe goes back to 1994 when the stadium was first opened. And so, the Orioles decided not to move forward with the 5-year extension, but to negotiate in good faith. If you look over the years, we've made significant improvements to the Camden Yards facility. We've replaced seating, we've had upgraded the scoreboards, the lighting, replaced the roof and escalators, updated the suites, and added amenities like the roof deck and picnic perch, which is a personal favorite of mine. So we've made significant investments. Last year, we passed a piece of legislation that allowed for an even greater investment, up to $600 million, so long as a long-term lease is in place. And so that was our intent, was to push forward the conversation of getting to a long-term lease. The Orioles not exercising the option is fine, and it sounds like the agreement is to continue negotiating to get something done this year. That's great. That's what we would love to see. It's the reason we passed the legislation last year, is that we want to guarantee that we'll see the Orioles in Baltimore for the next 30 years.
So, Mr. President, what is the strategy here? The Stadium Authority chief is on his way out. Wait till a new one is appointed and then pick up the pace?
No, I think, the beauty of the Stadium Authority is it's not just, it has a board, and that's who, I think Chairman Kelso did a wonderful job, was a great public servant, and really did well by the state. But of course, every governor has the right to appoint their own individuals to lead agencies and organizations. I would say Chairman Kelso left a good framework. He'll still continue to be there until a replacement is named. But at the end of the day, the Stadium Authority has incredible staff, and it's really the staff who are doing a lot of the day-to-day negotiating, and with their legal team and with the experts that are employees of the Stadium Authority. And so those negotiations don't stop. They continue in earnest. The board would ultimately approve what is a staff presented proposal and will work within the confines of the board's negotiating principles. But there's no reason to believe that a changeover in the board will slow down any of the negotiations.
Millions of people are on the verge of losing Medicaid coverage because of changes at the federal level as we're emerging from the pandemic. There were some pandemic era stipulations that prevented people from getting kicked off of Medicaid rolls. What is Maryland doing there to prepare for that?
It's a question that I had for the new Secretary of Health, Dr. Herrera-Scott, who is very aware of this issue and has been very mindful of what the impacts could be. I will really wait to hear a plan from the new secretary. I think that she has been in this, she's been both in the department and has worked on the private payer side, has an incredible amount of expertise. And so I'm hopeful that she will present plans moving forward. This is going to be a big issue come March, or I guess it's May is the end of when the state of emergency lifts. So it will be May when those reclassifications would begin. I have no doubt that this is front of mind for her, and that she is going to have the entire agency ramped up and planning through the governor's office to be ready for this moment.
And with a follow-up on Medicaid, you'd mentioned earlier this week how Maryland has seen a big rise in the number of children eligible for reduced price meals. Any new development there? Have you found out anything?
Nothing of substance since last Tuesday. I mean, I do know that one of the additional facts that I did learn is that in the fall of 2020, there was a reduction of about 20,000 farm students, and then in the fall of 2021, there was another 20,000. So it is likely that about 40,000 of the 100,000 newly determined could be those who came back came back to city schools or came back into the system. So the 100,000 it's further evidence that this has just been such an extraordinary time, that the data is very dynamic.
Going back to nominations really quickly for the secretaries. The nominee for DJS, Vincent Schiraldi, has had some conversations, and I know that there's been some potential criticisms about his views on juveniles and whether they should be charged as adults under the age of 21, or if that should be raised even higher, or where that limit should be. Have you had any conversations with him about where he stands on the juvenile system, and do you have any concerns about his views moving forward?
I had a really good conversation with the acting secretary yesterday, and I was actually very pleased with the work that he wants to do with juveniles that are currently in the system. And of course, that'll be his position in Maryland, to work with the juveniles. He's really hoping to have more programs for them so they stay busy. You know, right now, the juveniles that are waiting for trial have like a 9 to 3 school day. He'd like to have the opportunity to give them more opportunities to learn and, you know, spend their time. So I don't know about his previous issue. I think I know what you're referring to, but he's going to be in Maryland to work with our juveniles, and I think he's going to be a great addition to the staff.
Did you guys talk about the accountability steps that he would put in place, or conversations about making sure that there is accountability for these kids who are involved in juvenile crime?
We talked briefly about that, and we want to see more services provided, particularly for the children that are under 13, and more needs to be done to help those children that are maybe starting on, you know, a career of crime. So just more input as to how we're going to handle those under 13 children. We did talk about that. Thank you.
2 minutes, guys.
On the juvenile one, just one last piece. In the conversations that I had with the acting secretary, he made a great point to me, which was when it comes to youth involved in crime, it's a bell curve, and that of the 95% of kids in the middle are often the ones not talked about. What is often talked about in the news and in communities are the 2.5% at the either end of the spectrum. Those who are either very young or those who are committing the most heinous crimes. The system overall, though, is in the 95% is really where you make a massive difference in the safety of communities. And he was very, very, very focused in on the importance of making sure that we have services for juveniles who are coming back into communities, that they have the right services to actually change their behavior and change their perspective on their futures. And so I was very impressed on his knowledge and expertise, and you know, certainly look forward to learning more about his experience in history.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna have a quick follow-up. Does he have any concerns about the fact that kids under 13 can't be charged with any crimes?
He said it's very, very important that he get out to police departments, because there are tools that exist for those children who commit crimes under the age of 12, and that clearly the existing state of the world today, there was not enough information being provided, and that it's up to the Department of Juvenile Services to make sure that every agency knows what services can be provided to make sure that those kids can be served.
Mr. President, this could be just a yes or no answer to give the long question. The Maryland Stadium Authority report on Pimlico and Laurel Raceways is very tired over budget. It's delayed. Has anyone reached out to legislative leaders for guidance on how to move forward, and in particular, whether they're seeking any more money?
Yes, they have reached out for additional money. This is an incredibly frustrating situation. This is something that I certainly thought that we had solved on several occasions. At the end of the day, I think we've allocated significant amounts of resources in order to move this plan forward. We know that there are plans for Pimlico. We know that we want to keep the Preakness in Baltimore. And we know that we have the ability to protect the thoroughbred horse racing industry with the existing resources. We've not seen a plan. It's incredibly frustrating conversations. What I know is that the industry is going to have to come together pretty quickly to figure something out, because we can't keep doing this exercise over and over again.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you all. Have a great weekend.